this is probably going to scare my chickens, but I'm going to go ahead and start this thing cold. Hasn't been run today. Just going to see how it works. Yep, that's pretty much what happens every time. It was a little slow, actually. Demonstration over. I'm done. I'm gonna have to go back and try and figure out. Gonna have to go back and try and figure out what in the world is up with that thing. But I'm done. That's it. Over. If you didn't catch my first video, my initial response to these were very favorable for the Remington and not so much for the Stihl. So how has that changed in the past year? It's gotten a little worse for this guy. I've really gotten to like this saw, this Remington. I certainly like the economics of it. Again, I paid about $100 for this thing. And if you were to buy a Stihl or a Husky with the same relative size engine, the 40-something cc's and an 18-inch bar, you're looking at spending $450 to start. And well, I just didn't want to spend that amount of money for a chainsaw. And I'm glad I didn't, because this thing has really worked out well. It started very easily, first or second pull, even in the dead of winter. It's done really, really well for me. I would rather have 3 of these saws in various sizes and power abilities than this one, because this one just keeps letting me down. I've had it now for 6 years, and I just can't say a lot of nice things about it. It's let me down on a number of occasions. Either it didn't start or it won't stay running. I've had a real hard time keeping fuel in it that it likes to drink, likes to consume. I've taken it in for service. I mean, it's left me stranded. Now, it's been over a period of 6 years, but honestly, for the first half of that 6 years, I didn't use it very often at all. We hadn't moved out to the homestead yet. I was still, living in suburbia, and I just didn't use it all that often. And then when I started to use it, it just kept consistently letting me down in one way, shape, or form. The fuel is a little bit different. This one takes a 40-to-1 and this one takes a 50-to-1. A lot of guys in the comments for the previous video talked about using 40-to-1 for both. I've tried this and I just can't seem to get this thing to consume anything that it likes. I had been using the pre-bottled, ready-made, already mixed up fuel, the premium fuel, for both of these for a while, but not too terribly long ago, I switched over to just straight old ethanol free and mixed it up myself with this saw right here. The good thing that came about that is this one has been running just fine. I tried switching over to this, not having it. Had to go back to the pre-mixed stuff for it to even attempt to run. It just doesn't seem to, it always seems to be breathing heavily if I was to give it a medical diagnosis. I've changed out all kinds of things in it. I've done tons of maintenance on it. I've sent it in to the shop to get it tuned up, to get it adjusted, and I just can't seem to get it to run like it should. Now, maybe that's my error. Maybe it's something with this. I don't know. Now, as far as power comparison between these two, it's a little bit unfair because this is a much bigger engine and a bigger bar than this one. However, if you're just talking cutting the same type of stuff or using it for a job that's a little bit more suited toward, this does okay. I just seem to run into a lot more issues of the saw jamming up and kind of bogging down. Now, I know a lot of that is related directly to the chain, and this is a little itty bitty chain that doesn't take much wood at a time as opposed to this one. But as far as the overall power of it, I've been very impressed with this. I did have a couple bogged down issues as I was going through, good grief, oak trees I couldn't get my hands around. But most of that was me just really pushing the saw because I was trying to get this tree down and trying to get it processed up and out of this person's yard and back to my house. And I pushed it a little bit harder than I should. I just kind of pushed on it and really didn't let the saw do the work. So I created some issues with that, I think. Same kind of issues I have sometimes with this, but overall power to power, it just seems like this has a little bit of an edge. Again, it's not a fair comparison because this is a small saw that's designed for smaller things, but this just has a lot more bang, a lot more punch to it. But you kind of expect that with the two different saws. Now, when it comes to starting these two, this thing's been a dream. Every time I go out to start it up, first, second pull, I may have done a third pull on this in single digit days after it's been sitting in my uninsulated shop for a while, and really had no issues with it other than that. It starts, it runs, it does great. On those colder days, it does take a little while to run. It likes to idle for a bit before you go up and crank it up to full power. It kind of sounds like it sounds and feels like the top end just doesn't quite, you don't quite get there until the engine gets nice and warm. But my goodness, I'm talking teens here and single digits. So that's not too bad considering I don't change up anything really in its operation from winter to summer. And maybe that's something I should be doing. But overall, it's been just fine. Cold days, actually this does pretty well in cold days. I had more success trying to start it on cold days than I have on hot days. Maybe there's something to that, I don't know. But when it comes to the starting, this thing has this easy start where you kind of sort of pull the chain, the string back and kind of let it catch. That's been a real pain in the neck. You got to learn to feel for it. There's a feel to it instead of just a grip it and rip it kind of thing, which you're used to in most pull start engines. I hate it. I mean, I've tried to embrace it. I've tried to like it. But the thing is, when you cannot, and maybe this is by purpose, you cannot do that while holding it. So every time I need to restart this thing, I got to put it back down on the ground because that first little, you can't just pull it. You have to ease it back. And when you ease it back, the saw is riding all around. I'm trying to hold it funny, and I'm trying to hold it in a way that's not safe. So I end up putting it on the ground and trying to start it there. That's an extra pain in the neck. Whereas this thing, once it gets running, if I flip it off, I'd flip it off just to move something, change it around, grab it, rip it, just for safety purposes, and it starts right back up every single time. This makes me do something different, makes me get into a different position. I got to find a place to put it down. I got to be able to do it. I don't like that easy start at all. I can't stand it. It is not easy. It's actually much more difficult in most normal situations that I run the saw. So how does it cut? When it comes to cutting, this definitely has the bigger advantage on that, mainly because of the thickness of the saw teeth. These are much bigger. Now when it comes to cutting, initially the chain that this had on it was a semi-chisel, or even less, I don't know. But it didn't really cut really well, and I was going through chains seemingly faster than I should. I recently switched over to a full chisel, and that has really made this thing eat. There were trees, now when I'm talking mainly pine trees, because I have a lot of down pine trees, but really big pine trees, that when I had the semi-chisel or the previous chain on it, it would go through it, but it was just kind of slow and it just wouldn't really cut. Moving to a different chain, just a cheap tri-link full chisel, turned this thing into a wood eater. I mean, it really makes all the difference. For the same tree, I quit, kind of getting like, this is taking too long, I'm going to come back to it later. That's down on one of my fence property lines back here. I quit, I walked away. I came back after switching to the big chain, and I cut that thing up in a matter of minutes, and I was very pleased with it. This wouldn't even attempt to go through that. It would just take too long. It gets too gummed up. Just really doesn't work. Next up is durability. If you look at durability on these things, I've had this for 6 years. I've had this for 1. So kind of hard to say on the durability front, but I have had to take this into the shop a couple times. The one time the throttle got stuck wide open. Now, that's not a good place to be when you can't even start the thing in a safe manner because it's running wide open all the time. I can't throttle it. Everything got stuck. I looked at the little pieces in there and it wasn't something I could do. It's just simple tools. I don't know. So I took it into the shop. That's the bad news. The good news is it was covered under some sort of a warranty or thing like that. So it didn't cost me anything. But again, it was another instance when this saw let me down and I couldn't use it and I had to go to this one. So instead of the situation that I thought I was going to be in, where this was going to be my most used saw because it's a little smaller, it's a little easier to maneuver, and this was going to be the backup, it's switched. This is my primary, this is my backup, and I don't enjoy going to this. Every time I pick it up now, I get frustrated. So why am I shooting this video today? It let me down again. It let me down again. I could not keep the daggone thing running. Right now it's early March, actually the second day of March, and I'd need to cut down a couple oak trees, a couple small white oak trees just for some mushroom logs. We're going to try and grow some shiitake mushrooms here on our farm. All I needed to do was cut down a couple little trees to get this other oak tree out of the way. I mean, I'm talking the biggest one is this big around, and I couldn't keep the thing running long enough for me to do it. Now with some thickets and stuff in there, so what I needed to do was like cut some of these little small saplings out of the way, shove them out of the way, get the briars out of the way so I could take down that oak tree that was only about 15 feet tall and about this big. Here's the good news. I did get the oak tree down, but I didn't get to do any of the other clearing out around it that I wanted to do while I was in that same area with this saw because it kept cutting out on me. And I'm starting and I'm starting and I'm trying. The easy start is not easy. Nothing was working. I just put brand new out of the bottle pre-mixed fuel that I got just the other day from the store. It's never been kept outside. It's brand new. Put it in here and this thing won't stay running. And I got so frustrated, I'm ready to throw this thing down a cliff. You see all this oil that's around here? This thing has leaked pretty much constantly. I hate these little flip caps. It seems like they are impossible to align. Again, I just used this, so it's a little bit dirty right now. But man, what a pain. It just never seems to quite sit right. I've tried it on there. There was even one case where the fuel cap, I thought it was on, but it wasn't. And because it did the little click thing that it's supposed to, but then it just popped off and I lost a whole tank of fuel right out of the engine. It just dumped out. I hate these little things. When you have gloved hands on, like you're in the winter, for some reason, I can't get my paws around this thing and get that thing flipped up. The one back here on the oil is just about impossible to get to because you have to get in between right here and there, and I have a world of a time. Now maybe I'm doing this completely wrong and everything's upside down and I don't know, but if I can't figure it out, then it's too complicated and I don't want it. Next up on the don't like it list is how all of this stuff works here. I don't like this little funky thing, and this is actually the trigger part that broke before. I've had this break, this latch, where when you push this down, you're supposed to be able to lock this down, squeeze the trigger and be able to lock it down. I had this trigger lock fail on me once. I had the whole thing stick wide open on me, and I have bumped this switch on many occasions from there while it's running, and you know, I'm just doing my thing and then I bump that switch because it's so finicky, it's so tender, it just flips so easily. I have bumped that off, and then with as many issues as I've had keeping this saw running and getting it running again, that's the last thing I want to do, is have this thing turn off when I don't want it to. Okay, next up, this chain tensioner. So the good thing about this chain tensioner is I like that you don't need a tool. I don't have to carry this cranch out there with me, and this does work very simply. It's hard to work from my angle behind the camera, but I like the way this works in tightening the bar and all of that. What I don't like is this, because you can't make fine-tune adjustments with this. I can't get my fingers in there. It's so tight, and especially if I'm wearing anything, so I end up just going, and then it goes too far. It's too tight right now, but now I have a hard time getting it tighter and loose. I have a hard, see there, it moved like a whole bunch of positions, and it moved from being tight to being too loose. It's now not as much as I would like it. as far as tightness goes. This thing is just so hard to adjust, to make fine-tune adjustments. And if you get new chains and you have to make a whole bunch of adjustments, certainly while you're breaking the chain in, this is a real pain because you got to stop and do all of this, as opposed to the old-fashioned kind with just the scrunch, where you can use that tool and make micro adjustments to the chain as you see fit, no matter how gummed up it is, no matter how bad it gets. This requires me to break this down and clean it way more than I feel like I should have to. Okay, so now on to the Remington. All right. Now this one leaks too. You know, maybe that's just me, but honestly, I can't remember a chainsaw I've been around that doesn't leak bar oil. Maybe I got to do something differently. But I like this one because I can get my fingers in there and I can turn this, and I know, based on how tight or how loose it is, I can tell whether that's in. The other good thing is it's got that slot in there. So if I'm wearing gloves and I want to do this in the winter when it's just not nice outside, I can stick that scrunch in there or a screwdriver and I can loosen it with that. That's a huge plus to me, and it doesn't require all that fiddling and finagling. I know when this thing is locked in because it's a screw, it's a cap like every other thing that I use. Whether it's a jar, whether it's a oil cap, I know how a cap works. That other thing is just too much to it. So this is nice and simple. I like it. The fuel is the same type of cap. It's the same thing. So the back of the Remington, this, I don't know why, it just feels smoother. I like smooth. It doesn't feel as jerky. I can feel when the tension takes off. If you're using firearm terms, it's got a shorter let off and it's got a crisp, cleaner motion backwards. The other one is just wonky and it feels very terrible. This really only has up and down. It doesn't, the Stihl kind of feels like it has a couple settings and it just doesn't seem to work out like I like it. And this is it. Now this sticker I'm sure is going to fall off, but that is not easy to switch, meaning I don't bump into this and accidentally turn the saw off when I don't want it off. This is very deliberate. I can do it in gloves. I can do it with a stick. I mean a hammer. This is nice and easy to flip. I don't have to dig my hands inside. Let me put this side by side, and that way you can see what I'm talking about. So these two, this one is just a up, down, nice and easy. Whereas this one is kind of recessed back in this thing, and I mean, where is it exactly? I have to gauge in between. This is very simple. Man, I'm a simple guy. Stop, run, got it, understood. What is I have let's see, what do we have here? I've got some kind of Empire Strikes Back fighter things down here. I've got an I and an O, but it's a Roman I and I'm not sure which one of these. Oh good, stop, that tells me stop is up, but which one am I in down here? And why does it feel, why is it so wiggly? I mean, it just feels like it's gonna snap any minute, whereas this switch, my goodness, that's simple. So how's the choke work on this one? Well, you ready for this? It's complicated. There you go, it's in choke. How do you know when it's not in choke anymore? There you are, done. Yeah, it's got that same little Empire Strikes Back thing on it, but it's very, very simple. The fuel bulb is also back here where it's kind of protected. I get a little worried about this one being up here off to the side, but I haven't had any issue with it. This has worked just fine, but everything I need is right here. It seems to work, nice and simple on or off switch, but not everything is great about that. This right here, inside this air filter, it gets dirty in here, and that's fine because you kind of sort of expect it to get a little dirty. But the problem, I mean, is it gets dirty down in there. Now that has run into some engine problems a couple times where I could feel that it starts running a little sluggish. So this little thing right here, these filters are not the greatest. This little gasket, not the greatest. It doesn't really work very well. So what I typically do is I'll push a little bit of carb cleaner down in there and then get it right. So this thing, there we go, it goes back in there. I don't like that little setup, and it seems to be a little bit more problematic. I'm constantly cleaning these little screens and opening it up and cleaning the screens from the inside. It just creates a little bit more maintenance. But now knowing that I have this issue, I'm a little bit better off dealing with it. So now every time I come back and I do any type of maintenance where I sharpen a chain, which I try to do, at least touch up the chain after every fuel tank. Right now you'll notice my bars are upside down. Some of you may be wondering why I'm running bars upside down. Typically I rotate my bars with like every other chain. So once I swap a chain out, sometimes I'll do it right then. I just kind of look at the bar and see how things are working to give even wear on the bar, on the grooves in the bar, just on the top and the bottom. So right now they both happen to be running upside down because they're running on new chains. This one's running on a brand new chain because I hit a nail in some firewood the other day. Happens to the best of us, but I just about cried. It was a brand new chain, and I hit a nail that I didn't know was there and pretty much wrecked that chain. Last but not least, I definitely had an issue with this. This is got a little, nice little gear in there where this is supposed to run around, and I have had issues with that. It jammed up on me. It got so jammed up that I could barely get it to turn. So I really had to break the saw down and do some maintenance to get that freed up and oiled up like it should be. So it's all filled up in there. But that definitely set me back. I wish I had a spare bar lying around where because that stopped a work day for me. But that was one of those things that I got to chalk that up to user error. That was more my fault than the machine's fault. So when it comes to which chainsaw I prefer, right now there's absolutely no question it's the Remington. I mean, it's not even in the same ballpark. So much so that if anybody wants to buy one, I'll sell you a Stihl, no problem. I'll give you a good deal on it. I'm looking now, because of the problems I'm having with this and having to run different fuels and different wrenches and things like that, I'm seriously considering getting rid of this. Like, I probably will, quite honestly, get rid of this and get something different as my smaller trimming saw, delimbing and things like that. So one of the things I'm thinking about, and you can help me out with this, is have you had any experience with battery chainsaws? And maybe I'd be better off. I'm really leaning that way, is to get a battery operated chainsaw. I have a number of rigid and ryobi tools. That's most of the battery operated tools that I have, and it'd be nice to stay inside that family just because I have extra batteries. But quite frankly, by the time you wear out more than one battery, you've probably done enough damage to the chain that you should stop anyway and maybe hit the chain up real quick. But definitely moving to a better chain, a full chisel chain on this one, made a lot of difference. I mean, a lot. So that's been one of the big tips that I would take away. If you're going to get this thing, get a full chisel. Look for it. Get full chisel chains for this thing. The second thing that I would recommend on this is pay close attention to the air filter in here, and definitely do some maintenance on there. I do the same maintenance at the same time for both of these saws. When I do maintenance on one, I do maintenance on the other. When I sharpen one, I sharpen the other. It's pretty much just standard procedure. But this one so far, in terms of durability, has been way better. I've had that longer, but I've had way more problems with it. Again, and I really only have used it hard for the past couple of years, so maybe 2 years, and it keeps letting me down. So I'm not real happy with the Stihl. This, you can't beat the economics of it. A lot of guys out there in the previous video, and you hear this all the time, not just in that, but you get what you pay for. Well, right now, if you have to ask me, I'd rather have 3 of these, 3 different sized these, than 1 of these. This one, I'm pretty much done with you. I know, I hear you. I hear a lot of guys right now that are sitting there going, yeah, well, you got lucky. Maybe I did, because I have cheap tools that have lasted for years, decades, and I have expensive tools that have crapped out and not worked out for me. So I don't know what that is. I think sometimes it's luck of the draw, but I'm going to be real hesitant to jump down the Stihl line. I hear so many people saying such nice things about it, but my experience with that, I don't know. That's going to be awfully hard for me to go down that road again. Husqvarna? I don't know. I doubt it. I doubt it. This has been such a good experience. I'm willing to take another gamble on something that costs a fraction of what those big name saws run. $300, $100. I could have an 18, a 20, and a 16 for the same amount of money as that one. Be very happy with this saw, and if you're thinking about, if you're kind of on the fence, give it a shot. I mean, you're out $100. You're not out $300 on that thing. So anyway, it's all up to you. Thank you again for watching. See you next time. All right, gonna go grab a little bite to eat and say thank you to the chickens for their half day worth of work. Get going, got a few more to do.